Welcome, Hunters. Today, Bree and I are going to talk about the highlights of our upcoming event, Devil's Moon. It is a highly feature-rich and very rewarding event, and it is actually the conclusion of our Moon series of events. So hey, Bree, how are you doing today?
Hey, Vincent, I'm doing great, and I'm super excited to talk about Devil's Moon. Thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure to talk to you today as the narrative designer for Hunt Showdown. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the last chapter of the Moon series of events. So could you recap what happened in the story so far and maybe a bit of teaser of what we can expect from this event?
This is our conclusion to the series of Moon events, like you said. First, we had Trader's Moon, where Sherry started to do some things where he was up to no good, and Kevin, who was kind of an innocent bystander, ended up getting caught in the middle. We have Serpent's Moon, which established the fact that Kevin kind of took the call to action and was able to go and start fighting Mr. Sherry and get some allies along the way. And now we have Devil's Moon, which is kind of our equivalent to a big bad conclusion or an Avengers Civil War, where a lot of people are coming to a head and really the fate of the Bayou in Louisiana is at stake.
Thanks a lot for the recap. It sounds super exciting, and I also love the previous stories. And I can highly recommend all players to check out the stories section and story progression during this event as well, where you can even listen to some of the chapters of Devil's Moon in an audio format, which is very convenient. Please make sure to follow us on all the social media channels if you haven't already, which you totally should, because we teased a lot of other stuff coming up in the event. We showed some trailers with some new weapons, with some new mechanics. So please follow us, and that way you will be always updated, because on top of this video we will release 2 deep dive videos, one about the gameplay changes and one about the progression changes. Let's dive into Devil's Moon and let's talk about what's new in this event.
So the last event of 2022 for Hunt Showdown will take place from December 14th to February 15th. Based on player feedback, we made a lot of changes to this event, including a new battle pass system, a new way to get event points called the challenges, and of course a lot of gameplay changes, including a new wildcard condition that we'll get to later on.
As you mentioned, we did listen to a lot of community feedback, especially around Serpent Moon. I'm really excited to find out and tell players how their feedback really influenced this event. Could you tell us what really changed this time, what's new this time around this event?
Just like previous events, you'll be able to get event points from the same typical ways. So exploring the map, gathering clues, collecting souls from soul traps, banishing bosses, and of course, looting hunter corpses are all included, just like previous events that you know and love. We have some new interesting mechanics that will really make sure that people get their points this time around.
I can't wait to find out more about the soul traps you mentioned, but before that, could you tell us about the new ways on how people can actually earn event points this time around?
For people who don't quite have the time and really need to get through those event points, we've reworked Summoned into challenges, where a lot of people are going to find that they'll be able to take different tasks or requirements and get into the bio to get as many event points as possible.
We will dive more into detail about the challenges with Anton in our deep dive video regarding the progression, so please keep an eye out for that. But now let's get back to those soul traps you mentioned earlier. What are those about?
Soul traps are inanimate objects that have been placed throughout the maps by Mr. Sherry, in which he is tasking everyone to collect the souls from which he's been trapping and ripening inside them. But that's not all. You can also destroy the soul traps in order to get pledge marks, which you can exchange for new traits, which will really change up the gameplay and give players new powers and things to really change up the meta for Hunt.
So you did mention pledge marks. Are these similar to the snakes from Serpent Moon, and how can people really collect these in-game?
So they're not exactly like the snakes in Serpent Moon. Players can earn up to 3 pledge marks per mission, either by getting 35 event points, banishing a boss, or looting their first hunter corpse per mission.
So now we know how players can collect the pledge marks, but what can they actually do with them? Like, how do they use them, and how do they apply the traits you mentioned earlier?
You can use the pledge marks to pledge to 3 different pacts during the event. We have the Inferno Pact, we have the Lunar Pact, and we have the Grounded Pact, each with their own set of new powers in the form of traits that players can kind of mess around with, and it'll completely change the gameplay this time around.
How can players actually use it in-game, and how do these affect the gameplay?
For each hunter that you take into the mission, you can pledge allegiance to one of the 3 pacts with the pledge marks. So that is the Lunar Pact, the Grounded Pact, and the Infernal Pact. Each pact has new powers in the form of traits that you can use to really shake up gameplay this time around. But I won't get into it too much because that's for Dennis to do.
Yeah, I can't wait to learn more about the traits and the gameplay changes with our deep dive video with Dennis. So please, again, keep an eye out for all the upcoming videos and changes. But earlier in this video, you mentioned the new wildcard condition, which we never heard before. So what is that all about?
We're also introducing the Inferno, which is a new wildcard condition. The Inferno will change certain parts of all 3 maps and change how gameplay and movement works, so watch out for it and be prepared.
So Bree, that sounds literally fire, and I cannot wait to see the whole map in flames and how players play around that. But there's still one thing we haven't touched on and haven't talked about, which is obviously the rewards this time around. So could you tell us a bit about that?
We got a lot of player feedback for the Battle Pass as well, and so we decided to revamp it. It includes 2 legendary hunters, a lot of legendary weapons and weapon charms, a new weapon, several new weapons variants, and several new custom ammo types, plus a bit of event story unlocks if that's what you're into.
And as we mentioned earlier, we will have a deep dive into the progression system with Anton later on, and a gameplay and weapon video with Dennis as well. But with that, we came to the end of our highlights video. So Bree, thank you so much for telling us all about the highlights of this event. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to everyone's reactions to Devil's Moon, the end of the series of events, and for what's to come.
As an avid lore friend, I also cannot wait to find out what's the ending of the story of the Moon series. You may have noticed that with update 1.11, Mr. Sherry is gone from the Dark Tribute feature. But with that being said, please make sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep up to date with everything hunt related, but also to get the deep dive videos we mentioned earlier with Anton and Dennis about the game and the event. And without further ado, guys, see you in the bayou. Bye.